Hi and welcome back to the show. My name is Mark Leruste and today's guest is Daniel Priestley. Now most of you might know him for being a best-selling author of 3 books, the CEO and co-founder of a global company, but this interview is slightly different. We open up about his journey of becoming a father and how that's had a change in the way he runs his business. We talked about his new book that's coming out, but most of all, we talked about the secrets and the tips behind the most successful entrepreneurs that he's come across, and he's come across a lot of entrepreneurs. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share it with your friends, subscribe to this channel, and I cannot wait to hear your comments below this video. Until then, I give you Daniel Priestley. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, so excited having you. We were just sharing our common interest in podcasting.
I love podcasts.
Yeah, and was it My Dad Wrote a Porno? Is that
one of my favorites? I mean, it's the #1 podcast in the UK. So you always see it, and I thought, what is this thing, and why is it so popular? And it's hilarious. I mean, I've been walking down the street, giggling out loud, listening to that podcast.
I know. I was trying to convince my partner to listen to it. And I was listening. She was like, "What is this?" I was like, "Basically, it's the guys. Dad wrote a porno, and then they're talking, and
they read the
banter,
porno,
yeah.
and it's deeply uncomfortable and disturbing, but also hilarious." Yeah.
So also, like Daniel, so you're Australian.
I am.
Born in Australia.
Born in Australia. Grew up in a place called the Sunshine Coast, which is a real name.
Yeah.
That's how we name places in Australia. We have a place with red cliffs, and it's Redcliffe. We have a very sunny coast. It's called the Sunshine Coast.
Yeah.
And everything else is great. So great Australian bite, great barrier reef, great sandy desert.
Yeah, and there's always something I'm interested in guests is like looking at like the story behind the story, and it seems that one of the things that, you know, when you were a kid, you used to organize like, is it barn sales when you were 10 and dancing parties when you were in your teens or something?
It was weird. Yeah, I did dance parties in my teens, and they were big and successful. Like we had thousands of people come to dance parties and organizing DJs and prizes and radio sponsorships. And then my earliest really entrepreneurial venture was we had a house fire. Everything got damaged, and I saw the entrepreneurial opportunity in this to sell all the stuff.
Become a fireman. Oh no.
Yeah, well, no, yeah, exactly. I won't light another one if you pay me. But basically, we had insurance cover everything, so we had all this stuff that was going to be replaced anyway. Yeah. And I couldn't believe we were just going to throw it out. Yeah. I thought, but I can clean it and I can sell it. Yeah. Now, I'd never cleaned my room, but for some reason, the idea that I could sell this stuff was great. Yeah. And then when I put together the garage sale, there wasn't enough stuff. And I don't know where a 10-year-old gets an idea like this, but I walked around the whole neighborhood inviting them to do a 50-50 split. And I don't know, where does a 10-year-old think of this stuff? But somehow I had it in my head that it would be fair if they put their stuff in my garage sale, they could have 50%, I could have 50%. Sure. And so I had all this stuff on consignment. We did joint ventures. I ran a garage sale, made a few $100s. Yeah. Bought a fluorescent green BMX.
12 years old. Like, great question.
Check out my fluorescent green BMW, people. No, BMX. Let's get that really clear. Sega Master System. I mean, I was living the dream. Yeah. Living the absolute dream. And it felt good. Like, it was one of those things where I actually remember a specific moment where this guy, he's negotiating with me on this burnt out microwave oven, smoky microwave oven.
You said it's like retro.
Yeah, exactly. And he says, look, I want to talk to your dad. And he says, look, your son won't negotiate below $20 on the microwave. You know, can we do it for 15? And my dad says, it's not my garage sale, it's his garage sale. He's in charge. And it was like, wow.
Power. Yeah. Was that your first sense of
Yeah, so then I was like 30.
Just for negotiating.
Yeah, exactly. It's my place.
Yeah, there's something really interesting I'm noticing around this kind of sort of entrepreneurs I've met or people who've started businesses. I've got a confession to make, which I haven't actually said, I think, publicly. When I was a kid, I managed to convince my best friend, Dennis, I'm really sorry, I'm throwing you under the bus here. I managed to convince my friend to pick flowers in my parents' garden and then go knocking on people's doors around the neighborhood, saying that we're raising funds for African children. And then we went to go and spend the money on sweets. So I have repented myself since. I've worked for a charity for 4 years to try and raise millions for charity.
You have cleared your sins.
But there's something about like this.
We did the flower selling, by the way.
You did?
Yeah. So even worse, I went and bought wholesale 100 roses, which were covered in thorns, and I had my mother and my sister sit and wrap them while I managed, and we put them in wrapping, and then for Valentine's Day, I bought these for 40 cents each, and we were selling them for $4 each. So massive markup, and we were going around. I was dressed in Dad's tuxedo, and a pair of skateboarding shoes, and we went door to door selling roses. Yeah.
So you've been here 10 years?
I've been in London 10 years.
And like, the accent is now slowly becoming a little bit more British than Australian. How does that work?
Just softening up. Otherwise I get people saying, "Oh, do you work in Shepherd's Bush?"
But when you go back home and you meet your friends and around like
I can't win, because when I'm in Australia they say I sound British, and when I'm in the UK they say you sound Aussie still. So I'm stuck somewhere in between. Yeah,
there's your book, one of the first books I guess you wrote, or the first book that you wrote that I know of, Become a Key Person of Influence. It's probably one of the books that I've recommended most to people I've come across looking to sort of go from the traditional 9 to 5 to starting their own business. You've got a track record of starting and growing businesses and selling businesses, writing best-selling books. But the thing I'm really interested about is that having worked with so many different early-stage entrepreneurs and different stage entrepreneurs, you must start seeing patterns. You must start seeing like things that happen. Before we get that, what would you say is the emotional journey of being an entrepreneur that's not being spoken to?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. So the pattern is incredibly predictable, and the entrepreneurial journey is super predictable. And every single person who goes through an entrepreneurial journey, they feel probably like being a parent or being in love. You feel like it's the first time anyone's discovered something, and it feels so unique to your own experience. But actually, when you speak to a lot of entrepreneurs, it's very much the same ups and downs that people go through. So there's the pure excitement of startup, where you feel like starting the business is the big thing, the big step. And that's
excitement.
Excitement, anticipation, nervousness, and then once you actually start, you realize, oh, actually, that was just the first step, and there's a lot of steps to go. So, that moment of telling people that you're in business for yourself and handing out the first business cards and all of that feels so exciting, but also very quickly becomes terrifying, because you also realize, I'm now in business, and now there's a lot to be done. So then the next phase is what I call the wilderness. And if you imagine what it feels like to be out hunting, gathering, surviving, keeping head above water, and that's actually the experience for 75% of all the entrepreneurs in UK and Western world. So out of 5.25 million businesses in the UK, 75% don't employ anyone. They work almost from home or car, or so they're very, very small businesses. And here's how I describe it. The anxiety that someone has job hunting, where they go and put their CV out, they go for interviews, they meet with people, they're waiting for the follow-up phone call. All of that level of anxiety of being on the job hunt, you do that every month.
Multiply that by 10.
It doesn't end. So what happens is you're job hunting and you finally get the job, and now you have to look after that client and go job hunting. And you're like, whoa, how do people do this? So there's that first terror of, I'm in the wilderness and I'm also kind of unemployable because I've shifted my mindset, and I can't go back to where I was, but I'm also not enjoying this all the time as much as I thought it would be. So there's that. And then there's this magical moment that I wish people would get to faster, and I always encourage people to get to faster, which is the boutique team comes together. And that is where you get 3.5 people is the magic number.
Like a midget and three.
Or someone part-time. But three key full-time people and a part-time accounts, bookkeeper, admin type person who you don't need full-time. But you essentially need someone who's going to play the frontman role, the lead singer of the band, the key person of influence. You need the head of sales who's going to basically make sure leads and sales come through. and the head technician who's going to make sure that
the
the value gets delivered, the client's looked after.
Yeah.
And when that magical little team comes together, that's really that first glimmer of, oh, this is the magic. Yeah. This is the business. So one thing that very few people know about me is that I've never actually been on my own in business. So I've always skipped the wilderness. Every business I've started with a team. So on day one, there's always been 3 of us in that first meeting. I treat starting a business like a bank robbery. Every bank heist is the same. There's the crew sitting down in the basement with the map and the plan, and they're talking about, what time does the guards change and all that sort of stuff. And they're trying to figure out how they're gonna do this. And that's how all my businesses have started, with a bunch of cool people sitting around the table. Well, how would we generate leads, and what would we say to people to make the sale, and what do we want to have a website? Do we just want to divert to this? What sort of price do you think we should charge? Should we come in really expensive, or should we
bouncing back ideas?
Exactly, bouncing ideas, and we launch together with those roles. Glenn has always been head of sales. He's going to make sure that happens. We've had operations and, all of that. So we really kind of have our heads together that we've got these roles between us. So that's, that's the boutique, and the boutique feel lasts right up to 12. Yeah. And from 3 to 12, you really think you've mastered the universe. And you actually probably have. Because for the last 15 years, there's this magical type of business that is the punching above your weight global small business. And that basically means that you can be 3 to 12 people and global. Yeah. So you could have clients all over the world, low overheads, funky little offices, and you only have, inside your company, you only have high value stuff happening. Yeah. You're leveraging media, you're leveraging digital and technology, and you're creating a brand that looks much bigger than you are. And for so many reasons, it's just such a fun business. 3 to 12 people is just like, that is the magical business. That's the best bit. That's so great.
Yeah. And then I'm guessing afterwards you go for another stage, which you call the desert.
You ruin it. You destroy this beautiful little business that you've got. And all you have to do is hire the 13th person. Yeah. So Jesus.
So why is it that? Because I've heard you talk about this before.
It's biblical. It's Jesus. He had 11 disciples. It was him plus 11. It was all going swimmingly well. They're cruising around, giving seminars, enrolling people. Great fish business, bread business, wine, all multiplying. Yeah. And then ends up with a team of 13, and that's where the politics set in. Didn't go so well. It would have just been supper had it been not for that. But what happens is that you become too big to be small and too small to be big. Yeah. And basically you enter this scaling phase. And when you hit 13 people, strangely, the team is just a little bit too big to be self-organizing, and you need a manager. You need a little bit of a hierarchy, and this is where it
conflict starts beginning, toxins, challenges,
and also the cost structure. So the having a leader whose job is, or general manager whose job is to manage or lead, is an expense that you can totally afford at 50 people, right? But not really affordable there. Yeah. So you end up with HR issues. You end up with team dynamics. When you hit 20 to 25 people, you've got the team pulling in two directions. You've got what we call the original crew. Yeah. Original crew, first 10 people, love each other. Yeah. We always talk
employee
about
number 10.
Exactly. And good old days. Yeah. Oh, well, we never used to have to book appointments with,
the culture's changed now.
Exactly. We remember when it was actually a fun place. And
so you must come across quite a few people who come to you and say, Daniel, I've got this idea, I want to launch a business, what do you think? Or something like that. What has been one of the funkiest business ideas you've ever been pitched?
Oh, hard question, because there's so many ideas I've been pitched.
One that's maybe a little bit out of the ordinary.
For starters, let my brain simmer on that. But one of the first things is that with any business, ideas are not where it's at.
Execution.
It's all in the execution. Yeah. I'll give you a terrible idea. Sandwiches. Sandwiches is a bad idea, right? London desperately needs sandwiches. We need to walk into a purple shop Maroon shop. We need to have a silly French name that no one can quite grasp. We need some sandwiches cut in halves in a fridge. Grab one, go to the counter. That is a dumb idea, right? In the world of technology and Google and Instagrams and all that sort of stuff, why on earth would anyone do sandwiches? And yet, Pret is actually a brilliant business, scaled fabulously, highly valuable, exceptional brand. All of those things, they've just made a very, very successful business out of sandwiches.
Yeah.
I'll give you a brilliant idea. iPads. iPads are a great idea. Who had the idea for iPads? Microsoft. Right? Star Trek.
I remember the tablet. Do you remember the table tablet that they announced
2002.
Yeah.
Star Trek actually had the idea.
Really?
Star Trek in 1988. The guy's got what's called PAD, PADD. They actually called it PAD. And that's how he kept his notes in the star log and all that sort of stuff. So the idea, someone at Star Trek's got the idea for iPads. Then Microsoft actually says, we're doing it. They create a prototype tablet PC. They launch it. They stand on stage, talk about it. They describe it as the post-PC revolution. Yeah. Right? They name it. They know the trend. They can see the writing on the wall. They're calling it for what it is. But they didn't quite get the battery right. Yeah. And it was overheating and it wasn't quite ready for the market and it wasn't a
design.
Steve Jobs perfected those last little bits and he's credited as having the idea. Microsoft's credited as stealing the idea. A lot of people say to me, I've got this great idea. And I go, well, it is all in the execution. Yeah. It's really, I've seen dumb ideas done really well and I've seen great ideas done badly. Yeah. And
is there a business that you thought, what you've heard of maybe in the early stages, like this is going to be a great idea and you saw it and then it just didn't work out the way that you expected it and you were quite surprised?
I wish you had given me notice on these. in my brain, we have 2,500 clients on our accelerator.
Through your accelerator, through your experience, right?
There's businesses that
even outside the world,
businesses that I didn't think would go well that have gone really well. So recently, one of our clients on our Threshold Accelerator, which is our entry accelerator, she said that she'd had this experience of doing. She's an artist, and she had this experience of doing nude portrait of a woman who had lost her confidence, and it had transformed her. Going through the process of posing for the art, being naked, and also then seeing the painting was beautiful, actually transformed her confidence. Wow! So she said to me, "I've got this idea that I want to be an artist who does these." Boudoir portraits, but it's a whole experience that is actually not about the painting. It's about the confidence boost that it gives, and it's a milestone. It's an achievement. It's an experience. Yeah. And there was a few things I sort of thought this person's not going to be able to sell very well. I thought it's a nice idea, but will it be a business? Yeah. Is there going to be a steady stream of clients? Yeah. So all of those things went through and I suspended my desire to sort of, say it was a hobby or anything like that and actually let her run with it and explore it. And in that process, we look at who's your core customer, where do they live, where do they exist. We look at what is the offer and how do you, language that. Yeah. And we also look at how do you sell it. Went through the process and I've just discovered she's done a deal with Selfridges. She's got distribution. She's got a steady stream of clients, totally oversubscribed. Prices have doubled. She's smashing it. Yeah. So that was a nice one where I didn't immediately think that was going to fly, and it's flying.
So speaking about explaining ideas and so forth, why do you think so many of us, and put myself that included, freak out when we get asked the question, "What do you do?"
Well, there's a couple of great reasons, which is it's normal these days to have multiple interests. It's normal to be living in a grey zone of trying to, when you're making decisions about your own life in very changing times, you're feeling around for a light switch that doesn't exist. Yeah. So you're always in a little bit of flux. And when we're asked, what do? What happens in your brain is a Wikipedia page. So your brain loads the wiki. Yeah. And in the wiki is well, let me take you back to my
The
childhood.
experience.
Here's my background, and here's some of the people who inspire me, and here's one idea I'm working on, and here's another idea I've got, and here's a secret idea which I haven't told anyone about, but I'm bursting to tell someone about. And here's my background, here's my professional, and here's my qualification, and all this stuff fires up on the wiki. Yeah. So you actually have to have some discipline to say, I'm not going to vomit the wiki out. I'm going to practice and rehearse a little bit of a, to use an overused phrase, an elevator pitch or a social pitch. And I'm going to do that with respect to the listener. I'm going to give them a couple of key points that if they're interested, they can show some interest. And if they're not, that's okay. But I'm not trying to give them the Wikipedia version. I'm just going to give them the tweet.
Do you think there's something about like we're trying to stand out, we want to be remembered, or we want to get it right? Do you think there's like what's the emotional? I guess what's the question? What's the emotional?
There's two things that come head to head. There's the desire to be clear, and then there's the desire to be extraordinary. And if you're clear, then you have to basically describe what you do as the same as things that people already know. And if you're extraordinary, you have to be incredibly different.
Right.
So a great pitch is something that allows people to be clear and to understand the points of difference. Yeah. So when we're teaching this, we actually break it into those steps. So we talk about name, same, claim to fame, goal, and a game.
Say that again.
Well, if it rhymes, it's easy, right? So name. So what's your name and the name of the business? Same. What is it the same as? Yeah. Claim to fame. In what way is it? Is it a bit different? And
what have you done or achieved?
Yeah, what have you achieved? Or sometimes even what is a claim to fame? So it could just, it could be not necessarily relevant to that idea, but it could be my background is working with this company, or so name, same, claim to fame. Goal, what are you trying to do in the next 90 days? And game, what would be the big game going forward?
Yeah, I can't help but ask. So I think I saw you on stage maybe I want to say 3-4 years ago when JP invited me. And you used to, and in your book, you've got this analogy of you're sitting next to, I think it was Steve Jobs in your book, unless I'm mistaken. You're sitting next to Steve Jobs and he looks at you, okay, what do you do? And you start going, well, exactly what you said to do, open the wiki, do all this. And he doesn't really understand what you're talking about. And then you tell him, actually, what I'm trying to do is, combat renewable energy at a highly, at an affordable cost so that we can change the world one lamp bulb at a time. Have you noticed that you have to change now the person you're sitting to in the plane when you tell the story? Instead of saying Steve Jobs, you have to say Richard Branson now?
You wouldn't want to be on a plane with Steve. It would probably be a bad indication. But at least there would be an afterlife. Yeah. You'd have to use Elon now. Sitting on a rocket with Elon, and it's about to take off. And Elon,
that's the 2.0 version.
Exactly. Elon says, before, if we don't quite make it, what did you do?
Do you think everyone has what it takes to be an entrepreneur?
Well, do you know what? I really believe in entrepreneurial teams, and I hate the over exuberance and the massive hang up that we have about the founder and person number one or the person with the idea. It's really a team that executes. Yeah. I think everyone has what it takes to be on an entrepreneurial team and to add value to that team. Does everyone have what it takes to be the person number one who recruits the first couple of people? No. And does everyone have what it takes to be the person who's out there pitching an idea with nothing but a blank piece of paper? Probably not. Not everyone would have that. Or some people would be better suited to that. However, that only gets you so far, and it really doesn't get you, there's very, very few CEOs who have gone successsually from that. Like Mark Zuckerberg is a total anomaly. A guy
unicorn,
but also like a genius. He's a 1 in a billion, where he genuinely goes from the dorm room, creates a game-changing piece of technology, launches it, defends it legally, owns it, builds a first team, builds a second team, sets it up, gets it funded, gets the right mentors around him, and is now a freaking amazing CEO and runs a company like a boss, and actually is probably one of the most impressive, genuine CEOs in the world. He's a visionary, dynamic CEO who's come from the complete startup, and that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So there are certain people like Mark Zuckerberg that you could absolutely say, this person is a truly, true genius. But in the real world, we give way too much credit to the founder, and the founder doesn't deserve any of that, because it's the team around them that scaled the business.
Yeah. There's also the glorification of entrepreneurship, I think, that's happening, where people feel like if they're not becoming an entrepreneur, then they're a failure.
And this is linked to the glorification of the founder.
Yeah.
Because if you're not the founder, if you're not the very first person, then you're not an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Rubbish.
Yeah.
We talk about crossing the desert. So the desert is from 12 people, 13 people to 50 people. This is the hardest point, right? Once you hit 50, you now have a proper business. You're into performance. You can afford leaders, managers, CEOs. You can afford, you can get funding. You can get loans. All those kind of things happen. And I know we've got about 50 on the team, and there's a real shift that happens when you hit about 50 people. So this crossing of the desert, it's the team that holds together during that period of time. They deserve a lot more credit.
Love that. So you are part of the team. I'm not going to say like the CEO, but you're, and co-founder of Dent Global.
Well, I deserve lots of credit.
After all that, no.
I'm.
And it was formerly known as Intrivo, I think, back in the day, and now Dent Global. You've had, I think I read somewhere, like 15,000 people who've gone through like events, and then you've had. Personally worked with maybe 4,000 people, and then was it 1,500 people?
Well, numbers-wise, we've been going 7 years. We've had 2,500 clients. Yeah. I've sat down with 5,000 entrepreneurs. Yeah. I've probably given talks to over 100,000. At our events, we'd be close to 30 or 40,000 people coming to our events now. We've had 50,000 people download our podcast.
Wow!
Yeah,
that's amazing.
I'm blown away.
I bet Glenn must be happy about
Glenn's totally stoked. Glenn's loving that. We've got a good business where we've got offices in Sydney, Singapore, London, and the USA.
Yeah, I guess my question to sort of couple that was, what does success look like for Daniel Priestley?
So for me, success is feeling that I have a creative outlet, and it's very much the ability to come up with an idea, to have a team around who can execute with you, and I wake up genuinely amazed to be born at this time in history. So I feel like we were born in such an interesting time, that this technological revolution that's happening, the crisis that we face as a planet, the opportunity to have a voice, the opportunity to have influence, all of these things that come together in this crescendo that we live in right now, for me, it really, I wake up every day with a sense of obligation to make the most of the times that we're in. And I also, by the way, I temper that with not everyone's going to be Mark Zuckerberg and not everyone's going to be Elon Musk.
Sure.
So making the most of the times we're in doesn't necessarily being a billionaire or something like that. But I feel success means for me that I feel like I made the most of the times that we're in. Yeah. I really had a crack, given the exciting times that we live in, that I didn't just sit around flicking through Instagram. Yeah.
And does it frustrate you when you have people that say this is like the worst time to do business because there's so much competition, the barriers of entry are so low, it's some industry like life coaching is flooded, like...
No, I have a lot of empathy. I really do. There are a lot of people who would be succeeding in business at any other time in history because they'd be the best in their neighborhood, they'd be the best in their local area. Yeah. And it's a strange time because if you're going into any industry right now, there are people in Tasmania, Singapore, LA, Mexico City who are having a voice in your industry. Sure. And who could potentially have a very loud voice in your industry. Yeah. You might go and talk to a client today and they say, oh, actually, I'm already doing something in that space. And you go, oh yeah, who is? And they say, oh, this company in LA that I found that, they do work with me on Skype and they do this and we email each other and it's like, oh, great. Okay, good for them. They have 17,000 clients and I'm looking for one. Yeah. So like I really have a lot of empathy we live in times that are very challenging. We have huge opportunity, but also there's a huge challenge. And it's kind of like a great wave that if you're lucky enough to be surfing that wave, then the feeling is exhilaration. And it feels so like, wow, I'm surfing this great big wave and I'm on it and I'm surfing it and having this. But also, if you're not quite surfing it, it's like, well, this thing could be a threat. I might get dumped. I might get swept out to sea. So it's kind of like, it's very disruptive times.
Yeah, and talking about disruptive time, you became a father recently.
Yep.
Yeah. How has that changed you, I guess, as a man and also as a business person?
It's given me routine. It's given me a lot more caring, a lot more empathy, a lot more understanding of what parents are trying to juggle. It's given me a real longer time horizon, because I often find myself thinking about, I need to do this because in 20 years' time, my boy will just be turning 22, and that kind of real sort of sense of, I also have this weird sense of if I did stupid things and messed with my reputation or anything that would be less than my best, and it ends up online, that stuff will actually stick around for years, and kids will tease kids about something that their parents did 5 years ago.
Yeah.
We're now moving into a world where
digital record almost.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm fairly sure that a lot of kids are going to be as a homework assignment going through mum and dad's Twitter account.
Oh my gosh!
And saying what were your parents?
Can you imagine if you could go right now through your parents? Like,
it would be wild, wouldn't it? Yeah, just see what were my parents tweeting at this age, and all that sort of stuff, and especially like on Facebook that you can actually pinpoint the dates and go and have a look. So yeah,
what kind of and we're coming to the end of the interview, and I'm just curious about that. What kind of coping mechanisms do you have in place to sort of deal with the busyness of running a business and at the same time juggling the family time?
Well, I have a difficult scenario because our business doesn't sleep. We have an office in Australia, Singapore, UK, and USA.
Yeah.
So it's really easy for me to do a 7 a.m. 7 a.m. conference call, and it's really easy to do an 11 p.m. conference call.
Yeah.
So if I don't have boundaries, then it's tricky. So a few things that I've done recently, which have really worked, is I make it almost like a must to do the bedtime bathroom routine most nights, unless there's something really, really, really important. And
we're talking about your baby, I'm guessing. Yeah.
No, we're talking about me. Every time
I got to do my bath routine.
I got to do my bath time routine, and I got to, rock myself to sleep. I read Goodnight Digger every night. Yeah, play with my cars.
Yeah.
So I do that with my boy, and also, I put date nights into my diary first, months in advance, and holidays into the diary first, months in advance. And also I've done things like I've taken the Facebook app off my phone. So it's still on my iPad and it's still available. I can go on Facebook for things, but I found it so easy to just hit Facebook and just spend 15, 20 minutes. And there I was sitting with my little boy playing Legos, and, and I'm sitting there just scrolling through Facebook because it's kind of like it's just there and it's easy. And next thing I'm aware of the fact that, he's trying to get my attention, and I'm annoyed about that because I'm reading something on Facebook.
Sure.
Wait a second, I got my priorities wrong.
Yeah.
So that happened enough to say, you know what, get Facebook off. I got rid of the news app. I got rid of the Facebook app. I buried my email app in page 3 in a folder.
Yeah.
So just little things. And I also, what I'll also do is when I get into the house, I'll put my devices on charge up in the spare bedroom. Which is a bit of a faff to, I've got to consciously go in there to grab
get
them.
it. Yep. Yeah, love that. Any morning routines? Any morning rituals?
My morning routine is with my little boy. So he wakes up at 7. I go and grab him. We go and do an hour of play, and so from 7 till 8, Legos.
That's very cool.
Yeah, breakfast, and we do all that.
Yeah. Any books you're working on at the moment that you can talk about?
Yeah, so I'm 28,000 words into book number 4,
Wow.
which is called 24 Assets.
Okay.
And I codified the digital assets that are required to scale a business, and there's 24 of them.
Yeah.
So this is particularly relevant for a traditional business that feels that it needs to go digital. So my books actually follow a sequence. In the sequence, you would read Entrepreneur Revolution first, which is about going into the world of entrepreneurship. Then Key Person of Influence, which is about establishing yourself as an influencer. And then Oversubscribed, which is about building an audience, getting known, having clients, getting into a position where you're spoilt for opportunity.
Yeah.
And then the final one is the ability to scale up into that, which is 24 Assets, which is how do you then create a business that does scale globally? How do you address all of the different moving pieces? And then it's differentiation through an ecosystem of assets. A lot of people are looking for one or two things that differentiate. What I've discovered is you actually have to get about 24 things in place. Yeah. And then once you've got these 24 things, it does differentiate the business.
Yeah. I want to take a moment to acknowledge you and to thank you for the work that you've been doing in the world of entrepreneurship. I've followed you for a few years from a distance, and the thing that you bring that I really appreciate is this sense of ease, and you make things sound very simple. And you've got this brilliant way of explaining and using graphs, from your entrepreneur journey to the 5 KPI elements that you need. And I've seen, from Brian Rose on London Real to your own talks, and you just have this amazing impact. So I just wanted to and your book has been one of my favorite books to recommend.
Cool.
So anyone watching this, Key Person of Influence is great. Obviously Entrepreneur Revolution and Oversubscribed too. And your next one, 24 Assets. But I want to say thank you for that.
My pleasure. I apologize if I made it sound too easy.
And actually, as a result, this is just something, before I ask you about 2 questions, you might not remember this, but one of the things I remember you saying once was you should always have a notebook on you. And definitely. I was going to ask you as a trick question, do you have a notebook on you then?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you one. It's going to take off the price here. This is a bit awkward. But there you go. This is a notebook.
That's a great size too. And I love Moleskine.
And that was one of them. And the other thing is I know that you used to travel around a lot. So I wanted to give you a little travel lodge so you can remember where
I used to where
you used to go.
Oh, that's a place I used to go and visit back when I could easily travel. Yeah. No, I love it. Fantastic.
What does being unconventional mean to you?
Okay, so for me, being unconventional is about trusting in the future more than you trust in the past. So if you realize that we're in changing times, then you get really excited by the idea that we're living into something. And at the moment, the worst thing you could do is just simply say, no, I'm going to try and reset the clock. One of the most dangerous things that's happening in the world is that people are being sold a narrative that we can somehow go back to
make America great again.
Make America great again, right? We can make America great in the future. We can make America great for the times that we're in, but going back to a way that it used to be done. So what not a lot of people know is that the USA is manufacturing twice as much as it did in 1985 today. With 1/3 of the workforce. So they're actually, the manufacturing sector is huge in the US. Yeah. And not only that, it's growing. So US companies are bringing factories back to the US because they can automate the factory and have 3 engineers running 400 robots. So it's all coming back, but there's no people there. Yeah. Then you can say, and Foxconn, the manufacturer of Apple iPhones, laid off 40,000 people in 2016 because they replaced them with robots and automation. Wow. So the idea that you can somehow avoid that is as crazy as saying we can go back to an agricultural age, or we can, let's go back to a time when we're all farmers. Wouldn't it be great if we all plowed fields? Everyone was full employment in plowing fields. So trusting in being unconventional at the moment is, in a world where we're electing presidents based on the narrative that we can go back in the past and the past was better than the future. Essentially, that's what the narrative is. Sure. The past was better than the future. Sure. And that's a very dangerous idea. Sure. So being unconventional at the moment is to be unwavering and trusting that there's more important work for humans to do. that actually letting go of shitty blue collar jobs that no one should have to do, repetitive, painful, long, mind-numbing jobs, that actually there's better work we can do as a humanity. 7 billion minds and hearts could be out there solving bigger problems than screwing, screws into the back of devices.
Yeah, and there's one thing I forgot to mention, that through your company and your adventures, you've managed to raise £350,000 for charity, which is
a little bit more now.
Yeah, those are the last numbers I had. So
that was a couple of years ago, and it's probably more like £500,000. For everything we do, we factor giving into it. We don't make a big deal about it, because that's not why we want people to buy, and we don't want to use it as a ploy.
Sure.
But what we typically tell clients at the end after they've worked with us is, oh, by the way, while you were on our accelerator, someone was being completely funded through tuition in Malawi, and we've actually put someone through schooling, and that was because you were on the accelerator.
Amazing.
So it's a nice little touch that we do.
What's one thing that most people don't know about you?
Probably that I have some very tough. Sometimes I really get fed up with entrepreneurship. Sometimes I just wish it was simpler and easier and more black and white. I think probably everyone thinks that I'm always positive and happy about being an entrepreneur. Sometimes I get stressed. Sometimes I get fed up. Sometimes I think, wouldn't it have been great if I had have chosen an easier path? Sometimes I get sick of hearing about another business or an idea, and sometimes I absolutely love it, and that's most of the time. But I think it's probably a healthy thing to be more open about. There is stress, there is difficulty. There are certain times where you're really frustrated, but you don't feel like it would be appropriate to talk about it with some of the people around you, because you don't want to put them off doing business with you, or you don't want to put them off of believing in you and all that sort of stuff. And I've had those moments as well.
Yeah, and it's a bit like when we sort of, just before we started filming, you asked me what you do, and I said, I just said, it's one of those questions where I kind of freak out a little bit, and I've just been practicing with that a little bit, just being a little bit more open. If you could leave behind 3 truths that are truer than true for you, that you'd want to share with the community listening to this, what would be 3 things that you've learned about life or about business, whatever?
You ask these big questions straight off the cuff, as though like, all right, so here's a couple. I believe that you get what you pitch for, and that if you want something, you need to be out there pitching for it, and that a lot of people have a subconscious desire that someone's going to come and pitch them and bring a great idea to them, and actually, even though you're not sure, and even though you're not 100% clear on how it's going to happen, you've got to still go out and pitch for what you want. So I believe you get what you pitch for, and you're always pitching, and if you pitch negative stuff, you pitch that into existence as well. So that would be one. I believe that that acts of consumption weigh you down, and that consuming content, consuming entertainment, consuming stuff is actually the problem, and it's acts of creation that creates energy. So a lot of people who feel that they are de-energized go into consumption mode, and they actually would get more energy from creating than consuming.
Love that.
So I think that there's a lot to be said for addressing problems through acts of creation, not acts of consumption, and that will actually bring more joy. The creator gets more joy than the consumer. So that would be another one. And I believe that that we're all here to make a dent.
Yeah.
So make some sort of an impact. We have a time in history where your message can spread. You can create a product and sell it, and then I'll go a bit further. I believe that the biggest problems on the planet will be solved through entrepreneurial thinking.
Daniel Priestley, it's been an honor. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Pleasure.
Thank you. That's it, folks. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you'd like to continue the conversation, write down your question below this video. You can also find Daniel on all the usual suspect social media. The links will be posted behind this video. If you enjoyed today's interview and you'd like to find out more about the kind of guests that we have on this show, make sure to subscribe to this channel. You can also go over to markleruste.com/videos. In the meantime, you can download my book for free or buy it on Amazon, whatever fancies your tickle. But if you want to get it for free, I'm going to give it for limited time only on my website at www.markleruste.com. Scroll down, download it, read it. It's going to change your life. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.